We're now going to head into the past to help us understand how our modern interpretations of nationalism have developed. While there have been other very important revolutions like the American or Bolshevik revolutions, the reason we're looking at France is because it really is the catalyst to the development of our modern ideas of nationalism. So the revolution began in 1789. Wait, we need to go back even further. I'm going to have to talk real fast because we need to start with the collapse of the Roman Empire way back in the 6th century. Various groups, Goths, Visigoths, Vikings, they're all attacking the Roman government who's ruling over them, and the government just can't maintain that vast empire anymore. So the government collapses, but now who's in charge? Things are getting pretty chaotic, so people begin to band together in their communities, usually under a powerful leader who could afford to give them protection. These lords demanded the loyalty of people in exchange for that protection, so nations began to form under the connection of having the same leader. The national loyalty is to the leader. In addition, the Christians are gaining in power, and the church becomes figuratively and literally the center of village life. They control education, healthcare, and culture. The government and the church work together to control the people. An example of this is the idea of the divine right of kings. As various powerful lords fought each other for control of territory, the winner would declare that God must have wanted him to win, therefore God must want me to rule. The lord who won many wars and territories would eventually declare themselves to be the king, and their descendants would say that, hey, since babies come from heaven, God must have wanted that firstborn son to be the next king, so God wants me to rule. And in a very religious society, that argument always wins. So society became organized again, but it had a very strict class system where if you were born a farmer, you stayed a farmer. And there wasn't much technological advancement because there wasn't a lot of interaction between communities, so good ideas just weren't being spread. We call this time the Dark Ages because so many of the cultural, political, and education advances of the Greeks and Romans were lost. People were focused on surviving instead of coming up with brilliant new ideas. Wars and plagues kept this going on for almost 1,000 years. But by the 1300s, those city-states started to become nation-states, with countries like Spain, Portugal, France, and England becoming established countries, although their borders would change a whole lot of times. And these nation-states were somewhat more stable than the smaller regions, which allowed for the exploration of brilliant new ideas. Wealthy families like the Medicis invested in art and scientific discovery, leading to the Renaissance and the Scientific Revolution. Right on the heels of these important eras was the Enlightenment, a time when philosophers began to question why society was organized the way it was. These Enlightenment philosophers studied the democratic ideas of ancient Greece and Rome and asked why we didn't apply them here and now. The ideas of men like Voltaire, Locke, and Rousseau got people questioning the ideas of individual rights and the community loyalty versus having just a loyalty to our leaders. In the 13 colonies, citizens began to protest against British control because of these Enlightenment ideas, and when the British refused to change, the people waged a war, the War of Independence that created the United States. And that war was supported by the French, because they hate the British. And this is what led to the French Revolution. Okay, let's go back to 1789. There were economic, social, and political factors that all led to this momentous event. Economically, the government was broke, in part due to supporting the American War of Independence, also in part because the monarchy built lavish palaces and didn't understand that you might want a budget for all those big parties you're holding, and in part due to the fact that the richest people in the country weren't paying their share of taxes. Oh, and to make things really hard for the people, there's a terrible famine due to crop failures, which means that bread, the staple of the French diet, is hard to find. But let's get back to that tax thing. So why weren't the richest people paying their share? Well, because most of them were nobles, part of the second estate, and that meant they had special privileges. You see, France at the time had a pretty strict class system known today as the old or ancient regime. Either you were part of the first estate, which was the clergy or the church, the second estate, that's the nobility, the lords, ladies, dukes who have special titles and get special treatment, and everyone else belonged to the third estate. That could include the poorest homeless person to a pretty successful farmer to a member of the bourgeoisie. Those are the community leaders and wealthy businessmen, kind of like how we see doctors and lawyers today. This cartoon was created during the Revolution to protest how the first and second estates were living off the hard work of the third estate. And politically, France was an absolute monarchy. The king could do whatever he wants and control all aspects of people's lives. While this type of government can get things done quickly, if your king is an idiot, you're in trouble. And basically, France's Louis XVI's reputation is, he's a bit slow and doesn't really want to be the king, but has no choice because he was born into it. The economy's a mess, Enlightenment ideals are spreading, which can lead to revolution, but he's just not doing a whole lot about it. Now, King Louis XVI does try and fix the economy by trying to raise taxes on the nobility, but of course the nobility refuses to accept this. So Louis calls an old governing body called the Estates General to see if he can't get that economy fixed. In this government organization, each of the three estates gets the same number of representatives to speak on behalf of their estate, and then each group gets one vote. Well, it's not really fair to the third estate because they make up 97% of the population. So the king fixes this by doubling the number of the third estate representatives, but still keeps their vote at one. Problem solved? The third estate starts to protest and wants to create a new governing organization, but the king refuses and actually locks them out of the meetings in the Palace of Versailles. The third estate representatives head over to an indoor tennis court and create an oath saying they will not quit until they get this new governing body that they want. This event is now known as the Tennis Court Oath. Catchy name. This is the first revolutionary step, but I don't think the members of the third estate really had any idea at the time how revolutionary things were going to get. 20 kilometers away in Paris, there are rumors, based on fact, that the king is bringing in foreign troops to prevent this group of revolutionaries from gaining any power. Well, the people have had enough. They're hungry and they have a hope that they can make the country better. There was this prison in Paris called Bastille that often held political prisoners, people who were in prison because they opposed the government. Well, the mob attacks the Bastille, takes the governor, puts his head on a pike, and frees all the prisoners. Okay, there was only 7 there at the time, but the people got their hands on a whole lot of weapons, and now the revolution has become violent. And more importantly, the people have torn down a symbol of the tyranny of the government. They're starting to see that they can have some control. They are creating a collective consciousness. These two events are important parts of French nationalism. Today, Bastille Day is celebrated to remember the beginnings of this revolution. It's kind of like Canada Day with less cutesy floats and more military parades. This history helps to unify the nation of the French people. So the king agrees to listen to the third estate representatives, creates the new government, but the economy's still not fixed. After hearing rumors that food is being hoarded at the palace, women with hungry children in tow walk the 20 kilometers to Versailles to demand the king do something to fix the food crisis. Along the way, the crowd grows, and when they get to the palace, they ransack the place and demand that the king and his family move back to Paris so they can see firsthand how bad things are. Now, this event is linked to that famous line, "Let them eat cake." So the Queen Marie Antoinette was pretty unpopular. She spent way too much money on clothes and parties and wasn't even French. She was Austrian. Rumors spread that when she'd heard that the people were starving in Paris, she replied, "Let them eat cake." Now, there's a few different interpretations of this. One is that it was just a rumor. She never said such a thing. Another is what she meant by the comment is we need to do whatever it takes to solve the famine, so let's find food for our people. But the most accepted interpretation is that she is a complete idiot who couldn't imagine an empty kitchen, that if you don't have bread in one cupboard, then open the next one that holds the cake. Okay, so at this point, the king is now living in Paris and has basically lost all of his ability to really look powerful. Political groups like the Girondins and Jacobins are starting to control things, and at first, it's really great. Taking the ideas from Enlightenment philosophers, they abolish feudalism, which is kind of like slavery, create a Declaration of Individual Rights, which many other nation states use as the basis for their charters of rights and freedoms. They encouraged a national identity by adopting nationalist symbols like the tricolored flag, the bonnet rouge, the national anthem, and the motto of liberty, equality, and fraternity. The people were becoming unified to each other instead of being unified by their leader. Our modern idea of nationalism. Think about it in Canada today. We don't feel a nationalist loyal to the Prime Minister, but to our nation state, to our fellow Canadians. This was a revolutionary change at the end of the 18th century. Now, the new government, it gets reorganized several times as they try to get it right, wants to create the perfect enlightened society, so they change even more. They make the calendar and time metric. You now had to call everybody citizen. You couldn't use Mr. or Mrs. The culottes of the nobility were banned, and men were now expected to wear pants, and even formal religion became banned. Churches became centers of public thought. So things are starting to get a bit extreme. Oh, but they're going to get so much worse. Many French citizens were losing their hope that this new government controlled by the people was really going to fix things. And to make matters worse, there were monarchies in the countries surrounding France that were now waging war on them, like Marie Antoinette's Austrian brother, the Holy Roman Emperor. This new government was afraid of losing all the progress that had been made to these counter-revolutionaries, so they created the Committee of Public Safety under the control of Robespierre. Well, to say that Robespierre was paranoid is an understatement. Thousands of people, including the king and queen, were sent to the guillotine under the mere suspicion that they were counter-revolutionaries. The ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity got lost in the chaos. This reign of terror, as it's called, didn't end until the Committee of Public Safety decided to execute Robespierre. A new government was set up, but it was weak, and it didn't fix the economy and basically set the stage for Napoleon's takeover. Now, there are so many other things that I wish I had time to discuss because the French Revolution has so much to it, but we're out of time. So let me just leave you with this. No longer were the French loyal to their king or the church or local noblemen. Now they were loyal to the nation and the ideas of liberty and equality. This new kind of loyalty was destined to spread throughout Europe and the world.